Thank you so much for volunteering to conduct phone mock interviews with our students. This is a quick 15-minute training just to introduce you to the purpose and format of the program. You should have also received a mock phone interview guide, which includes this information plus a bit more detail, including sample questions and an evaluation rubric. So we wanted to start with an explanation of why we're doing the program, why we're doing phone mock interviews and not in-person interviews. The biggest reason is because these interviews are most commonly used to screen candidates and to determine who's going to be advanced to the second round of interviews. So a lot of organizations screen a greater number of individuals than they actually bring into the office for in-person interviews. So we want students to feel really prepared for this process. Phone interviews also present some particular challenges. Not all students are used to talking on the phone, and it's more challenging to really create that connection with the interviewer as you don't have the opportunity to see each other face to face or rely on body language and facial expressions. We also have some students for whom English isn't their first language, and so talking on the phone can be pretty challenging if they're not used to that. We're really excited about this program because you get to bring your real world experience interviewing candidates, and it's important for students to get that feedback from professionals who are out there working in the real world. This is the second time we're doing this program, but we still consider it in the pilot phase and welcome your feedback and will ask for feedback. The program's open to students in all majors and class years, and we didn't really want to create any barriers for students to sign up. So you may get some students for whom this is their first interview ever, and they might not have any interviewing experience. We ask you to be patient, and we will give you some resources and assistance and how to provide feedback. But most importantly, we want you to encourage them to keep practicing. We want it to be a really positive and encouraging experience. We did give students the option to send in a job description if they're preparing for an interview in a specific field or for a specific type of position. Although there weren't many that took advantage of this last year, if you do receive one, we'll send it along to you and ask that you maybe create a few customized questions based on the description. However, the real goal of the program is to help students to develop responses to the most common interview questions, so things that will be asked regardless of the industry. For this reason, you might have students sign up for your interview slots that may have different professional interests or academic backgrounds, and that's okay because we really are working on these core questions with them. In terms of logistics, the day before your interviews, you will receive a list of the students who have signed up for your interview slots, including their email addresses, phone number, and the interview time that they're signed up for. We asked each of you to sign up for 2 to 3 interview slots, and so we're going to try to fill as many of those as we can. You'll also get attached to that email the volunteer guide that you received today that has links to additional questions and resources. And in that guide, you'll find an interview rubric, which just may be helpful when you're giving feedback and determining how the students did. Really importantly, we ask the students to call you because you're going to be having multiple interviews, and so I think it's good practice for them to call you and try to stay on time. But if a student doesn't call you, you'll have their phone number, so we do encourage you to reach out and say, hey, what's going on? I was expecting your call. So the first question we want you to ask is some version of the tell me about yourself question. This is really common. Sometimes interviewers will say, walk me through your resume. But if you have a job description, you might also customize this and say, tell me about yourself and why you're interested in our company or in this particular job. And we want the students to have about a 30-second to 1-minute response or introduction ready for each interview. We want them to really highlight information that's related to that job or industry of interest and to avoid anything that's irrelevant or too personal. So we have an example of a response here where the student is explaining that they're currently a senior at the college, that they've been studying politics for the last 4 years, and they highlight some recent experience that they've had in Brazil and how that really solidified their interest in working in government and improved their Portuguese language skills. So this could be really appropriate for a student who's looking for something international, looking for a government opportunity, or even looking for something where language skills and cultural competency is really important. We then want you to ask some behavioral-based questions, which typically are questions that start with, tell me about a time when. And the underlying idea behind these questions is that past behavior really is a great predictor of future behavior. So we really want students to be able to tell a compelling story with enough detail to really explain their skills and capabilities to the interviewer. So there's a few examples here, and there's also a link to several more in your volunteer guide. This is also where you can customize the questions if you have a job description. So for example, if a student sends you a job in event planning, you might ask them to tell me about a time that you planned a successful event. So you can pick up on the skills that they are seeking and really craft a behavioral question that's related to that job description. One thing to watch out for is if you ask a question like, tell me about a time when you worked with a difficult colleague or a time that you failed. We really want to ensure that students stay positive and aren't bad-mouthing any former colleagues. They should be able to talk about challenges and failures in a really honest way that shows personal growth and what they learned from the situation. So especially if you are working with a student who's a particularly strong interviewer, you might want to throw in one of these questions to see how they do and give them some feedback about that. We have a method that's called the STAR method that really helps students craft those specific and appropriately detailed responses to behavioral-based questions. So it starts with stating the situation and giving some details about the background, providing a context, where were they working on this project, when, going into the task, so what were the challenges, the expectations, what needed to be done and why. Specifying the action, so what did the student specifically do? What action did they take? How and what tools did they use? And then really importantly is pulling it together with the results. So what was accomplished? Were they recognized? What did they learn? Was there some result that they can quantify? So to give you an example of a STAR response, this is a response that could be to a question such as, tell me about a time that you were successful, tell me about a time that you enhanced a program or a process, or maybe even tell me about a time that you planned an event successfully. So an example is, last semester I was the vice president of marketing for my sorority here on campus, and we are responsible for planning and executing a major philanthropic event benefiting the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I was part of the team that developed a comprehensive communication strategy. We used both social media, so we have our own Twitter account. We also partnered with the college, their official Twitter and Instagram accounts. And we also created some direct outreach to students and potential donors about the event. So crafting some email communication, delivering flyers, tabling in the cafeteria. And I think this comprehensive plan where students and potential donors could find out about the event in multiple ways really contributed to the attendance at the event. And in fact, we saw a 50% increase from the previous year, and we ended up raising over $3,000 for St. Jude. The strengths and weaknesses question can be really challenging, so we want you to ask that. Strengths are more simple. They should be relevant to the job, and students should be able to provide a concrete example that makes the interview believe that's actually a strength. Weaknesses, they should be honest, and it's important that the student demonstrates a self-awareness, so being able to identify things that they need to improve, and also providing an example of how they've been improving that particular weakness. So an example that's given here is a student who talks about being very detail-oriented, which can be a strength, but in some situations it could also be a weakness because they're really getting too immersed in the details and unable to see the connection to the big picture. So they talk about how that might lead to spending too much time on unimportant tasks, and how the last summer in their internship they worked with someone who was very big picture, and they challenged them to think about that when allocating their time and their work. And it would probably be even stronger if the student could give an example of a project they worked on together. But you're showing how the student identified that and really made improvements to kind of change their thinking and address that weakness. At the end of the interview, we want students to have some questions ready. So when you're still in your interviewer hat, you should ask the students, do you have any questions for me? And if they don't know what types of topics they should ask about, you can give them some examples. So things they can ask about include getting more information about the interviewer's experience at the organization, but also really getting some clarification on the expectations and goals and skills that the organization is seeking. So maybe asking about people who have been successful in the past in this role and really what made them successful. So what distinguishes someone that's good from someone that's great at the position. Better understanding how they might be evaluated. And we really want students to ask about the next steps or the timeline for decisions so that they're able to appropriately plan and to know when they'll be hearing back from that organization. If the student did provide a job description, they may also ask some things to clarify information written into the description. So this is another place that they might be able to customize the mock interview. When you're evaluating the student, we want you to look at a couple of different things. Importantly, we want you to evaluate their enthusiasm. So again, they aren't able to use body language or to see the interviewer face to face, but did their interest in the opportunity come through just with their voice alone? How was their communication? Was it clear? Was it easy to hear? Was their pacing appropriate? And then what was the quality and relevance of the answers like? Did they actually answer the question that you asked? Did they provide concrete examples? Were you able to get a really strong sense of their skills based on the examples that they used? And when you start the conversation providing feedback, I think it's good to start with a question. So asking the students how they think they performed. A lot of times they'll be more harsh on themselves than you actually would have been, but it's good to have them kind of think through what they might have done differently, to have them articulate what could have been stronger in their interview. Try to be really honest, but also positive and encouraging. Again, this might be the first time the student has ever interviewed. Provide specific examples of places that they could have improved. You might want to take notes while they're responding to your questions. And then we really want you to emphasize the importance of practice and preparation, that interviewing is not just something you wake up tomorrow knowing how to do. It's a skill that you can develop. We want to emphasize the importance of researching the organization and the job description before they go into the interview. You can mention that we have a virtual mock interview tool that they can use through the Career Advancement Center, and that they can also do a mock interview with their CEC advisor, and many of the other Forrester Career Network volunteers have also offered to do mock interviews with students. So please let us know if you have any questions before you get started, and thank you so much again for your volunteering to participate.